and pension administration. I think after where we are now in this point in the year, we can all look back and where we were back in March, and then really it gives ourselves a pat on the back to looking at where we've come to now. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what we've done in terms of pension administration. So firstly, COVID-19 and the LGPS. So quite early on at the start of the pandemic, the regulator issued guidance which gave pension administrators some priorities. So those priorities were based around payment of benefits, collecting employer contributions, minimising the risk for scams for members, and supporting good decision making. It was quite good that they acknowledged that pensions administrators wouldn't be able to do everything within their normal business as usual process. So it was good to have a steer from the pensions regulator of what we should be focusing on. We also had some really good FAQs released by the Local Government Association covering issues specifically for you guys as employers. So it covered things such as effect on pension administration, so what you can expect us to be doing for you. It covered information on furloughing, contributions, so what contributions should be paid on furlough pay, etc. Also information if you've got any staff on who had to go on reserved forces leave, and also things like governance and resilience and annual scheme events, so such as annual benefit statements. So I really hope you've had a chance to look at those FAQs because they were specifically aimed at yourself. And how you could still do, how you still could commit to your responsibilities as a local government pension scheme employer. In terms of COVID-19 and the Shropshire County Pension Fund, one of our main priorities was looking after our members, but also looking after you as our employers. So firstly, looking at what we did for our members, we followed the pensions regulator guidance to the letter, but also we went a bit further in that we prioritised reassuring our scheme members that their pension, whether in payment or still building up, would be unaffected. We were surprised at how many calls that we did have at the start when the world financial markets were decreasing, how concerned some of our members were, but hopefully we were able to provide that reassurance that local government pension scheme benefits are not based on investments, the members' benefits are not based on that. So that we felt that was really important to reassure those members when they were seeing news headlines about markets going down, that their pension benefits would be unaffected. Also, a top priority was paying members' benefits. So anyone with a payroll hat on in this call will know that obviously the last few months has presented challenges. So really pleased to be able to say that each month we've been able to run payroll remotely with all the staff working from home, and also do smaller payrolls in between to make sure that our lump sums and things still get paid. So that was a huge priority, and the team were able to do that with no problems. Another priority was dealing with deaths, obviously with the sensitive nature of deaths, but also paying any benefits that may be due to relatives. That became top priority and is still always a priority for the fund, and we're able to continue to deal with those. We also recognised that members would still need to be sending us information back, but obviously self-isolating and restrictions on certain things, we were able to accept information electronically, so via email. So we put that in place quickly. And also because we were restricted to going into the office, we couldn't deal with incoming posts as quickly. So we did want to make sure that we could still issue information in a different way, but also receive it in a different way. Pension scams has always been a top priority in terms of protecting our members, and we've always had robust procedures in place to make sure our members are protected from scams. But even more so during COVID, there was some specific communication that come out from the teachers and from the pensions regulator regarding specific transfer requests during COVID times from DB schemes such as ourselves to DC schemes. So we prioritise putting that information and providing that information to members who were potentially facing financial hardship, who thought it would be a good idea to transfer their pension benefits out, but it would ultimately ending and well, they could have been being scammed, but also it could be the worst decision for them. So we did prioritize that as well. With yourselves, engagement was top of the pile. We made sure that we regularly kept you up to date with our working arrangements. So hopefully you all receive our employers bulletin regularly, and we did ask you to prioritise retirement and payment of contributions. But we also asked you, because we're aware that pensions isn't your main bread and butter business, we also asked you whether you were going to have any issues with undertaking your an employer. None of you reported severe issues to us or had to come to us and say that you weren't able to do certain things. And I do appreciate that you were feeling and undergoing the same turmoil that we were in terms of getting your business as usual activities underway too. We also asked you to only send us urgent requests, and again, this is a thank you for complying with this, because during the first couple of months we were just getting to grips with making sure we were dealing with priorities. So any quotes that weren't urgent, we were asking you to limit these, and you did that, so thank you. We also asked you to let us know if you furloughed any of your LGPS members. This is because if you had furloughed an LGPS member and weren't paying them 100% worth of their pay, it does have impact. It does have an impact on their pension. So we needed a record of these. So if you haven't let us know already, please let us know. And finally, we have tried to reassure you of the future funding impact on the LGPS and on your employer contributions. As you will know, if you come to our annual meeting each year or in previous years, and in previous years our employers meeting when we've had our pension actuary in place, you know that the LGPS is a long-term investor. So we've got an investment strategy in place in order to securely manage blips in the market, downturns in the market. So any long-term impacts, so any short-term impacts, sorry, aren't so much affected because we are a long-term investor. Okay, so those are some of the things that we did for our members and for you during the last 6 months. So going forward, wasn't sure what to call this slide because we are still in the middle of the pandemic, but we are starting to look forward now. Now we've got through the last 6 months. So for us, because we all are Shropshire Council employees, all of the pension staff are now working from home permanently, with hot desking in place due to come soon. You probably would have seen, obviously, you're aware that our base is the Shire Hall, so that building will become more of a hot desking solution. And we are actually looking at some of the more permanent changes in our procedures and taking these forward where we think they will benefit our members, such as issuing information more digitally. I'd be interested to know actually if in your businesses you felt that in communicating with your staff has changed, or your customers. We certainly feel like the number of emails that we're getting has gone up, and the number of registrations for My Pension Online has gone up, because I think people are used to receiving information in a more digital format. As previously mentioned, we're now accepting electronic signatures, scanned copies of forms, and photocopies of certificates from our scheme members. This is actually a benefit to us. It meant that we didn't have to hold these valuables on site, and also our members didn't have to share that information with us. But we have gone through robust audit and information governance checks before making that a permanent procedure change. We are still receiving and accepting and sending out paper post, and I think we would still always do that going forward, but we are trying to reduce it by issuing information digitally. And our outgoing post is at the moment less often, but we are looking at a printing solution as well. So finally, going forward, so we're looking at more virtual meetings. I think we're going to be in this virtual world for some time now, but hopefully, as I've already said, this virtual meeting this morning has saved your organisation travelling time and costs for yourself, but also it saves coming out on a cold and grey day, really. And we are hoping our members, we're going to be able to still do face-to-face one-to-ones in the future using local hubs. So we'll see how that goes, but we are still able to do members one-to-ones virtually. So we can, and we have been doing those via Teams where members have got access. But as always, your employees and our members can still talk to us about their pension by giving us a call or sending us an email. So we've operated a full help desk function since lockdown began in March. So that's where we are with COVID and pension administration. So moving forward now, I'm just going to talk to you. I've got a couple of slides before I pass you on to Cheryl on current issues in the LGPS. So there's been quite a flurry of activity recently. I won't be covering McLeod, as I've already said, this will be covered by Debbie. But the two issues I wanted to just mention this morning was the 95k cap and a separate issue or bringing on wider reform, which is the exit payment reform, which is currently under consultation. It's important to remember these two issues are separate. So they're separate pieces of legislation at different points in their introduction. So we know that the 95 cap is the 95k cap is affecting different types of employers, and it definitely does have different timescales of implementation. So let's look first at the 95k cap. Okay, so the 95k exit cap, what we know today, and I've put a specific date on there because when the last couple of weeks when we've been writing these slides, we were writing them on the basis that the cap was not yet in place, or we didn't know the date that it was going to be in place. It has been on the horizon for some time, as far back as 2015, and then the government laid the initial legislation for the cap as part of the Enterprise Act in 2016. But it had gone quiet for some years. There was a consultation, and the government only released the findings of that over the summer. But more recently, we've had a lot more information about how this cap's going to work and also the implementation date. So the 95k cap is a term that's been thrown around for a while, but the legislation which actually is bringing in that exit cap is the Restriction of Public Sector Exit Payment Regulations 2020. So it's a bit of a mouthful, so I'll just refer to it as the 95k cap. And we know now that it's going to be in place from the 4th of November 2020. Okay, that we only knew that from last week. So the legislation had been laid a few weeks back, but it hadn't been signed, but it was signed last week. So that means that meant this slide had to change a bit. So we know it's going to be in place from the 4th of November. So in effect, 21 days after it had been signed. The most important thing to note here is that this is going to be before the LGPS regulations are changed. Okay, so what if you haven't heard of the 95k cap up until now? What it actually means is if you are an effective employer, because not all LGPS employers are effective, and if you've got staff who are exiting on grounds such as redundancy or efficiency, the exit payment that member of staff can receive is capped at 95,000. Okay, on exit. So that's what in essence it means. To remember that not all LGPS employers are effective, and the ones that are specifically listed in the regulations. We urgently need and are expecting guidance on this information. Really, the LGA has been lobbying DCLG, MHDCLG, should I say, on how funds are and more importantly, employers are meant to administer this. Obviously, we've known it's coming for some time, but since we've known it's going to be in place, it's going to be very quickly. It is quite a big issue for you guys as employers, and also working together with you, because we will need to know the value of the exit payment that you are paying your any staff that are leaving. And as part of the regulations, the 95k cap will include pension strain. So obviously we calculate that amount for you, but also the person's redundancy payments will be included. So both sets of figures will need to be known in order to work out, and any other payments that the member is receiving, which is part of the cap. So immediate considerations for yourself as employers is deciding whether you are an affected employer. So it's English and Welsh employees covered in the schedule, essentially all public service employees, but specifically for LGPS employees, this is council workers, police and fire, civilians, academies, but not further education, higher education colleges or admission bodies. Okay, but please do look at your own individual organisation and decide whether you are affected by the cap and specific the regulations. You should be looking, and hopefully this isn't new information, what I'm telling you, because if you are an affected employer and you do have an exits ongoing at the moment with any of your staff, so you're under consultation or you're having discussions, you should already be aware that this cap is coming in or has been due to come in, and you should be talking to those staff who could be affected by that date and also by the cap. Please make sure you communicate with your employees and with us. We have stopped providing quotations for redundancies and early exits because there's too much uncertainty at the moment to be able to provide information. However, if you've got cases which are realistic cases, so not just so the dates, it looks like that the member is going to leave on those dates, please let us know and we can have a discussion with you on what we can actually do. But we have stopped providing generic quotations because it's just too much uncertainty. So that's the 95k exit cap and coming in on the 4th of November. So moving on to more wider reform, and hopefully you're all not looking like the guy in the top left-hand corner, but there is more to come. So on the 7th of September, the government issued a wider consultation, which was a bit out of the blue. We knew the exit payment cap was coming, but we didn't know wider reform was on the horizon. So there's a consultation live at the moment, which ceases on the 9th of November. So you still have time to go in, read it and respond. And the consultation covers or seeks information on, should I say, restricting exit payments in local government in England, Wales. So not just looking at a cap, it's looking at all exit payments, so redundancy, statutory and discretionary payments. And the consultation is asking for views on the effects of the proposals of these reforms on local government and the impact on redundancy situations that you're all facing at the moment. So it's really important that public sector employers look at that consultation and then also provide feedback if you are proposed to be affected. Oops. What does specifically this mean for the LGPS? At the moment, we are unsure, but the proposals state that an employee who's over 55 would not be able to get both an unreduced pension and a redundancy payment. So currently the LGPS regulations are really clear in that if someone's over age 55 and they're being made redundant and they've got 2 years more service, they would automatically be entitled to a unreduced pension. These proposals under this reform suggest that a member would not be able to get both an unreduced pension and a redundancy payment, whether it be statutory or discretionary. The proposal suggests the employee would have an option of how to take their payments, so whether they would have a unreduced pension or a redundancy payment, and there's lots of different options because the strain has to be taken into consideration as well. So because we didn't want to, because there's so much uncertainty and the consultation is still out at the moment, and we don't know the exact effect this is going to have on the LGPS regulations, we are going to put on a separate session when more information is known. But again, hopefully, as largely all public sector employers on this call, this isn't new information to you. Hopefully you've been reading the updates that we've been providing, but also from your HR colleagues and other advisors, you've been receiving the information about the cap, but also about the wider reform. We in our last employer update number 8, we did provide some information, a bit further information on what the proposals do look like. So please have a look at that. And really, in summary, to end my part this morning, more changes are on the horizon. I feel like every year, myself, Debbie, and other colleagues stand up in front of you and say pensions are complex. We need more information. data, but pensions really are complex, and things are always changing, so it's keeping us busy. But unfortunately for our members and for yourself, it does mean changes to our processes are coming, and to the options that members have on retirement. So as ever, we will keep a close eye on the situation and continue to issue you with communication and put on meetings such as this as things develop. So hopefully that was a very quick whistle-stop tour of those two issues. So I'm now going to pass on to Cheryl Morrell, who's going to talk to you about monthly data and year-end process.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Becky. Can I just check you can hear me okay? You're right to confirm, Becky?
Yeah, I can
that's
hear
brilliant.
you.
That's a good start then. For those of you that are observant and can see me in the corner there, I am actually in the Shire all this morning. I'm having quite a bit of work done in my kitchen at the moment, and I have builders in, so it's extremely noisy at home. So I've trudged into the Shire Hall in the rain this morning, and I'm actually missing wearing my slippers, I have to say. As Becky said, I'm going to take you through monthly data. My team are responsible for collecting the data on a monthly basis and also the payments coming in for contributions. I'm also then going to give a bit of an overview of what we do with that data both monthly and at year end, and give a little bit of feedback on how the last year end did go. The next slide, Becky. Thank you. So most of you on the call will probably be familiar with submitting data to us, or if it's not you personally, somebody in your organisation will be, as all data comes in from our employers now through the iConnect service. And I believe we have 142 submissions currently that come through to us each month. So once you've hit that submit button and you've cleared any errors and checked any of the tolerance checks, the data is then winging its way through the air and through the system and hits the Altair pension system. So your part is done for that month. We will then receive that data, and the data will automatically update to our system. So it will update pay and contributions for the month. It will also update year-to-date figures of pay and pension contributions. And I think it's always important to emphasise that this is the really important figure, the year-to-date one. This is the one that will determine what the members' pension pot is going to be. And for any of our members that do log into the My Pension Online, can see their pension pot building up. So we do always ask that any adjustments that you're making to monthly pay through the year, that you please do make sure that you check your cumulative or your year-to-date figure to make sure that's accurate. We'll also then be receiving any new starters that you will have told us about. So where we can see that we don't have a record, it will create a new record. And we have a workflow system our end, so it will start to alert the team that a new starter has been set up and somebody will need to do something with it. We'll also receive your notifications for any of your leavers or anybody who's not opted out of the scheme. And again, we'll receive a workflow to that. So it will alert somebody on our team to then go forward and do the relevant processes. For leavers and for opt-outs, it's really important that you do still follow up with the PEN 007 leavers form. We do still require that notification from employers and confirmation of pay, but also for anybody with pre-14 service, it's really important we're still getting the final salary pay. So we can't actually calculate any benefits or give members any options until that PEN 007 form has come in from yourselves. Where somebody's possibly just changed a role within your organisation, so it's not deemed to be a change in contract, we can pick those up as what we would class as a post number change, where we can see that somebody's left a record or left a role on one day, but started the role, another role exactly the same day afterwards, then we'll just continue that employment and you don't need to send us a leavers form for that. But if it is deemed to be a break in contract, then you need to notify us on a PEN 007. Any questions around any of that? If anybody's never sure, then please just come through to us and we can clarify what you'd need to do. So another check that we do monthly, quite an important one, is we do a check to make sure that what you're sending us, what we're receiving into our bank account, also agrees with the totals that you've sent us through iConnect. And if it doesn't, you will hear from us. We will drop you an email and ask you to have a look at to see what the differences are. It's really important that you respond to us quite quickly on that. We do like to make sure that it's resolved as soon as we can, and in most cases people are really good and they do come back to us quickly. We also do a sense check as well, just to make sure that the amounts that we've received this month look somewhere comparable to what we will have received the previous month. And we set about a 10% tolerance because obviously we know some of our employers, pay is varying month on month. And anybody who's received the NJC Pay Award in September, obviously that will have made figures a lot higher. So we are taking that into account. But again, you may receive an email with us just doing a double check to make sure that what we've had looks right. Thanks, Becky. So I'll just sort of give you a little bit of an example of the sort of data numbers that we're receiving. So taken August here, and you can see from the slide there that we updated over 15,500 records with pay and contributions. So as we'll be having a monthly pay and a monthly contribution figure and a year-to-date pay as well, just pay and contribution data alone comes to around 62,000 pieces of data. We updated 243 records with some personal detail changes and received over 400 address changes. And we created around 200 new starters and notified of just over 500 leavers and just under 160 opt-outs. So as you can see, quite a lot of data being received and then quite a lot of processes to follow up afterwards. So new starters, we send letters out to all of them to say, hello, welcome to the fund. And we ask them to make sure that they filled in a new starter form if they haven't already sent one through to us. And obviously with leavers then, we'll be expecting PEN 007 forms to come through if they've left the authorities. And then we've got work to do on determining whether they're due refunds, deferreds, or whether they're a retirement. Some of you may recall the days of before iConnect when we would have received lots of spreadsheets coming through. So I'm hopefully a lot of you will agree that once we've got up and running with iConnect, we are receiving data much more securely with less risk of manual intervention and also in a much timely manner to what we had before. So when we get to the year end, the month 12 submission will complete data requirements for the individual records. By the time month 12 goes in, we will have had those 12 months worth of payments and contributions. So the year to date will complete that. And again, it's just important to say that that is the vital figure for us, the year to date amount. At year end, though, we also ask then that you send a final salary figure under the 2008 regulation definition of pay for anybody with pre-2014 service. And we also ask that you send any hours through for those people that you have who are casual staff, so those that are paid as relief where they just claim possibly timesheet hours, would be the average for the year. So it's at this point that those figures then, particularly the pay figures, are used for us to calculate the pension pot for the year. We will reevaluate the pension pot then and add any inflation onto it. And then those figures are used in tax assessment. So we will then be doing checks whether anybody's exceeded their annual allowance or the lifetime allowance. And they also then are used for the annual benefit statement. So I'm sure you'll understand that, that's why we do, me particularly, keeps going on about how accurate that figure does need to be. So we'll also ask at year end that you've checked that you have submitted all your PEN 007s to the team for anybody who's left to the 31st of March, and also that you have submitted any of the absence forms that we required where somebody will go on to a no pay absence through possibly a maternity. So it is just the unpaid period that we need to know about, and also that you have made sure that you've highlighted to your members when they return that they can look at paying for that lost pension. So as well as just making sure that we've got all the data in for the year that we require, we do ask employers to also submit 2 year-end forms to us. Most of you will probably be familiar with these. One of them is a reconciliation that the final pay, the final contributions that you've deducted from pay does agree with what you've actually paid over to us during the year, and that's the LGS 121A. And then we ask that you complete a compliance statement for us, which is the LGS 121B. And that just has a number of statements on that we, as the fund, just need assurance that you complying with the regulations, really, that you're deducting employees and employer contributions as you should be, and that you're returning the accurate care pay and APP, the assumed pensionable pay, should anybody have been on an unpaid absence or a reduced pay absence. And also that you're returning to us the final salary and any absences as well. So what do we do at year end? Once all the data has come through, we do a check that all the active records we hold have then had care pay, final salary pay, and contributions posted to the record for the year. We then do some sense checking across the care pay and the final salary pay to see that it looks reasonable compared to what we would have had in the previous year. And we set a 10% tolerance for any increases or decreases, and we would query those if we cannot see any obvious reason for this. So we do try to do some checks before we send queries out, just to see and see things like, somebody's hours change. That would obviously mean that their actual pay would have changed. And also, if we can see that an absence has been recorded, then that would account for it as well. But there are cases where it's not obvious for us, so we will just query, if there's something that that might have gone amiss. We also do another check, which just looks at the pensionable pay, total pensionable pay on your iConnect return for the year, and how that looks compared to the employer contributions that you've sent us. And again, some of you may have had some queries from me on that. It does throw up 1 or 2 records that may have been incorrect due to perhaps assumed pensionable pay not coming through. And then finally, we do the check across the LGS 121A forms. So we will look at your figures that you've sent us, and we will then look at what we've received through the year and what we hold accounts. And 1 or 2 of you may have had some emails from me if there has been any discrepancies that I've picked up. Thanks, Becky. So how did year end go for 2019-20? Well, I think overall it went extremely well. Becky's already touched on earlier on that it was, it has been a difficult 6 months. We were hitting year end at the time, pretty much of us all going into lockdown. And it caused many challenges, I know, for some of our employers. And for our team as well, we all adjusted to working from home very quickly. So I think it's a good opportunity to say a big thank you from me and the rest of our team to you all for your cooperation and for ensuring that deadlines were met, because on the whole the deadlines were met, and we got all of our forms through. We didn't ask for signatures. Again, Becky had touched on that, and it went extremely well, so thank you. All of our checks have now been completed. There's still 1 or 2 queries that I have outstanding, so if you've had an email from me over the summer and I haven't had a response, I will just be doing a few chases up over the next few weeks on those. But you may be interested to see there's some numbers on the slide there around the number of the queries that we did send back to employers. So fairly similar amounts for both the checks on missing data and on the tolerance checks that we do on pay. So the 1,300 or so queries that were sent back to employers where we had missing data, some of the responses then showed that actually it was correct. The individual may be a casual worker, so they worked for some of the year. They may have been an unprocessed leaver that had just been missed, so the employer was asked to process them as a leaver on their next upload and send the relevant leavers form through, or simply that the figures were missing. For whatever reason, they may have just been missed off the return. So employers then supplied us with that missing pay for us to input. Then of the sort of, again, similar number, around 1,300 queries sent from the tolerance checks. And this is, I mean, it's quite a monotonous task for both us and I think for employers as well, but really does prove that we do pick up one or two things that may have been missed through the year. So again, responses resulted in the pay was actually correct. So employers confirmed that a promotion may have taken place, a pay rise, or somebody who may have been on an apprentice was taken on into a full-time permanent post. Some absences may have been missed with incorrect pay being reported. So these are the cases where we require assumed pensionable pay, where somebody's gone on a reduced pay absence, but we were actually being given the actual pay and not the assumed pensionable pay. So again, employers were able to correct this at this stage, and we were able to then get the revised pay on records. So just as a matter of interest, from those type of situations, we updated between 400 and 500 records with revised pay, which were then input onto the records. So I think that pretty much just draws very quickly to an end. It was just a very brief sort of overview of how everything had gone. But just a sort of reminder to everybody, you're all very good at making sure that payments are received on time. So we have the deadline of the 19th of the month following deductions from pay for both your payments to come through and for your iConnect submissions to come through. If they are late and you know they're going to be late, I would say always give us a quick call, myself or anybody on the team, just to say that you're having problems. We can work with you then to try and resolve that or to see how we can get around it. We do record any late payments or any late submissions, which is sort of follows in line with our breaches policy. But it's really just so that we can see a pattern of where there might be some problems with employers, and then we can come to you and work with you and hopefully resolve any issues that you may have. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you all very much for listening to me, and I'll hand over now to Debbie.
Thanks for that, Cheryl. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Spent an hour listening to Cheryl and Becky and then start coughing. Morning, everybody. My session sort of follows on from Cheryl's, because what we're hoping is that because of all of the steps that we've got in place and had in place for many years, and the education and the engagement, so our education and the engagement of yourselves as our employers, in Shropshire, I think has been really good. You as employers, as Cheryl said there, are pretty good at getting your data in on time. You contact us if you've got any issues, and you're always engaging when we've got any queries back to you. So we're hoping that McLeod doesn't cause you too many issues, but what I'm going to do is talk you through what the McLeod Sargent judgment means in the local government pension scheme and why we might need further information from you. So what is the McLeod judgment? Back in, you'll remember, because of having to do all of the changes in your pension schemes, your payroll records, that back in 2015, the local government pension scheme rules had changed. So you had to make new returns to us. We changed from the final salary to the care accrual. the normal pension age increased from 65 to state pension age for all of the members. And there were some protections for those people who were within 10 years of normal pension age at 2012. The 2012 date was picked because the government announced in 2012 that it was going to be changing the public sector schemes. But that's why the protection was decided, that people knew from then that the pension wasn't going to be a final salary pension, and they could make other provision to have retirement benefits from another source too, if they thought it was going to be of detriment to them. There was a legal challenge, but because of course the protections were older members of our pension scheme, so it was seen to be unlawful. This was warned about prior to the actual regulation changes, but unfortunately it was ignored, I suppose, from the government, and the changes went ahead in all of the public sector schemes and changed them all to care in one way or another, with protections in place for older members. So anyway, it was challenged, and it's been deemed that it was unlawful, and that all of the pension schemes have got to now change. So what the McLeod proposals are doing is that anybody who was in the pensions scheme in 2012 is going to have some protection. It is going to cost money for you as employers. So for the people in the audience who've got finance hats on, this has already been assessed by the actuary, and you will be aware that you had the option to actually set your contribution rates at a level where you could already start pre-funding for the McLeod judgment. Thank you, Becky. So who's in scope? Anybody who was an active member in March 2012. So we're already going back 8 years now. So this is the other thing that we need you to be aware of, that we might be getting you to check records from a long time ago. We know that could actually cause issues, especially when you've changed payroll providers or are only following tax guidance and keeping the last 6 years of your records. But anyway, we've got records of what the employee was being paid at that point in time and what hours we've got that you told us were on. So was someone active in our scheme in 2012 and continued to have active membership in the 2014 scheme? That is the basis of who is actually going to need to be relooked at. The underpin period means that from the 1st of April 2014, when the care benefit has been accruing, for all members up to the 31st of March 2022, we will now need to have a look at whether their benefit would have been better under the final salary scheme or whether it's actually been better under the care scheme. The regulations are not going to be in place until the 1st of April 2022, but they will be retrospective. And they will obviously encompass everybody who has either continued to be in the scheme or has left the scheme since the 1st of April 2014 and ticked off at that box that they were in the scheme as at the 31st of March 2012. There's going to be in the proposal, so again, this is all based on the current consultation. So these proposals may be tweaked. We have been told by the government that a lot of time and effort went into putting this consultation together. So it's not set in stone. They are looking that they may be liable to tweak certain things. But at the moment, we've been told to take it that basically it will come in as it is. So work around that at the moment. So there's going to be a requirement for an immediate entitlement to a benefit to be removed. Currently, the people who were covered by the underpin, so those people within 10 years back in 2012, have to actually finish and be entitled to receive their benefit straight away for us to actually check their benefits. This is going to now be removed. So anybody who leaves going forward will check the underpin at their leave date. And if their benefits aren't paid at that date, we will then have to do another check when the benefits are paid. So that's a change for us as well. There's going to be a two-stage check. Aggregations. Aggregations are basically somebody who has put together 2 periods of membership. They can be concurrent employments because somebody's got multiple jobs with an employer. The teaching assistants are an ideal area of where we have a lot of aggregations because they have multiple posts, usually covering either several pupils or different sets of hours, and obviously those change quite regularly, and the individual can actually aggregate those sets of service together when one of them finishes and another one continues. So we're going to have to actually look at all of those aggregations as well, because they may need to be amended because we wouldn't have been keeping an eye since 2014 on their final salary membership when we've actually aggregated those records. But what will happen is early and late retirement factors. You'll know from, especially if you've been keeping an eye on your own benefits, what your payment date is. And if you take them early or late, then actually they are changed. So if you take them early, they're reduced. If you take them and decide you don't want them at your normal state pension age, as is in the scheme rules at the moment, they get an addition added to them. So those have to be taken into account as well in future, which hasn't been the case in the underpin since 2014. And of course, death benefits, where the underpin still will be taken into account in those as well. So for survivors' benefits. Thank you, Becky. So who will benefit? There's been some modelling sort of nationally, and you'll see that they think older members are more likely to qualify for the underpin protection. But who's likely to benefit? That's because anybody who started since 2012, if they were a younger member of our scheme, they of course won't have any underpin protection for service, even if service between 2014 and 2022. The active member older age group, or sorry, 41 to 55 isn't older, is it? I'm in there. That's a young age group. They supposedly are more likely to be better off with a revised underpin. And then gender equality, they are looking at that men supposedly are marginally more likely to benefit from the underpin too. And both of these are down to promotions. So again, it's still looking at, is there gender equality of how many higher paid officers are more likely to be male than female. So that's the reason the 41 to 55-year-olds and the men, you're looking at more likely a promotion is going to have a bigger effect on your final salary benefits than it would have done on your care benefits. Here, I'm not going to talk through the figures. I'll give you a second just to have a look. This shows you the difference between the care scheme and the final salary scheme. So it's interesting across the two cases to see the effect of the care benefits are accruing, because they're accruing at a better accrual rate. You've got the 149th. If your pay has only just crept up with either inflation or perhaps increments, the care benefit should be better for the majority of people. But if you've had a significant pay rise, you'll see from example 2 there that this is where you'll benefit on the previous final salary scheme. So again, lesser accrual, but of course all of the service that's accrued is going to be using that final salary pay. So you all of a sudden get a jump in what your pension is worth. So this is what we're going to have to be checking for a lot of our members going forward. Thank you, Becky. You'll see here that if a member retires at age 65 and their pension age is 66, that their benefits are subject to different different factors on that payment, because the two schemes have two different retirement ages. The protections in the 2008 scheme are still carrying forward age 65, whereas in the care scheme it's been age 66. So the underpin is going to take into account any reductions as well, and we're going to have to look at what is the benefit payable after those reductions. So currently we don't, and an individual who has been underpinned, if their benefit had been higher in the care benefit scheme, it would have been payable, even if the benefit payable because of the early retirement reduction would have taken it under what they would have had in the previous final salary scheme. So that one's quite complicated to sort of get your head around. But what the proposed underpin is going to do is make it fairer. So that's what we need to take from this, basically, is that the government has realised that the current rules in place are slightly unfair to members, and they can still be slightly worse off even with the underpin, but that's going to be improved going forward. So everybody, we will have to look at the early and late retirement factors when the benefit is actually being paid to know which is the better benefit. So full protection for the members, and that's a good thing. Thank you. So all of our qualifying active, so anybody in the audience who's a member themselves in the pension scheme, if you were in the pension scheme back in 2012, you'll have an underpin on your service from 2014 to 2022. So not all of your service going forward is going to be underpinned. It is only the period that was originally legislated on that was going to get this protection for the older members. But your final pay will be looked at when you actually leave active membership to calculate that underpin pension for you. So if you leave before retirement, obviously you'll have a deferred benefit, but we will still be calculating it at that point in time, and we'll look at what at date of leaving is better for you. And then when you come to actually draw that benefit, we'll look again to see which is the benefit, because of perhaps early retirement factors coming into play, to see which is the benefit better for you at that point in time. But the fourth bullet point there, any data gaps for the final salary calculation needs to be filled in back to 2014, is where we may be coming back to you as employers. Because for a final salary calculation for a part-timer, we will need to know their part-time hours changes to get the accurate service that we need to calculate that benefit on. Whereas for a care benefit, all we've needed to know is the pay, because they've just accumulated pension as 1/49 of each year's pay you've told us about. No, we're now going to need to do that calculation under the old rules for everybody who's got this underpin. So as you'll see on the bottom one there, this is going to be continuing now for a long time. So it gives my team something to do in their downtime. We didn't have any of that before. But also it will possibly be giving you more work as well. So that's what we need to cover today. So as you can start thinking about how, if we do find any gaps, that we're going to be able to fill them. Thank you, Becky. Pensioners, so anybody who's retired from yourselves, so either retired from being in active membership or perhaps left before pension age, but has still since then become of pension age and is receiving their benefits, or has chosen to take them early, we've got to have a look at, was the underpin better for them as well? So we've got to look at the qualifying pensioners. So again, always going back to the dates of, were they in the pension scheme in 2012? Did they come into the care scheme, and have they left since? If they weren't covered by the underpin protection, we're going to have to recalculate it and ensure that the new underpin doesn't give them a good, well, does it give them a better benefit? If it does, we've then got to actually calculate that benefit for them. So once we've identified the pensioners that it's going to affect, we need to be then looking at, is their record complete? Do we have all the data requirements to do the final salary underpin for them? Thank you. So all other leavers as well, again, anybody who's left since 2014 may have died, may have transferred out their benefits. We're going to have to be looking at all of those too. So there's a lot of recalculations will be needed. And again, for any of these people, we may be knocking on your doors if we think there's any gaps in the data on their service records. Thank you, Becky. I did mention aggregation before. Going forward, to get the protection, anybody who's got an aggregated record will have protection going on forward, that we will do this underpin calculation for them. If they haven't aggregated their record, they won't have the protection of the underpin, because it's going to be too complex if people end up with unaggregated records across different funds across the country. So there's going to be a change that only aggregated service will have the underpin. This will mean that we may be having to come to your members and give them new choices. So this is quite a complex area, because we're going to have to get ensure that the data we've got from yourselves is correct, and then we're going to have to give new options to the members that have already made decisions. So they might have to make a decision to unaggregate, or when they haven't joined their record up previously, they might change their mind and think actually they prefer to have the protection, and they will now want to do it. So again, a lot of work for my team, but it may mean we need data from yourselves to enable us to do the accurate calculations for the members. Thank you. Right, the annual allowance, for those in the audience who have been receiving questions from their members who've had pension savings statements recently, each year, as with the data that you're giving us at year end, we do some calculations to find out how much someone's pension has grown in line with the revenues rules. If it's grown more than 40,000, we have to give them a certain pension savings statement, and then they have to pay tax on, because you're only allowed pensions growth up to 40,000 tax free. Anything over that, so anybody who's had a nice promotion mid-year and has got quite a bit of final salary service will find that they may end up with a pension growth a lot higher than they would have imagined, and occasionally ends up with a tax bill. These annual allowance checks won't be being done each year on the underpin calculation, so this is just to let you know. And if you have any questions from your higher earners or anybody that has a promotion, we won't be doing the double calculation of checking their benefit also with the underpin. They will just have their benefit calculated under the care scheme rules. So we won't be doing it throughout their working life. They will just have one check when they either leave or when they actually retire. So that was just to let you know, and anybody who does understand the annual allowance rules, it's not going to overly complicate those. And we hope that this is going to be the outcome, that we just do one check when they actually finish or they retire. This just shows you there was some statistics put out on the impact of members across a fund. They've taken 60,000 members and looked that they think nationally probably around 31% of actives would be affected, just over 20% of other leavers, and around about 15% of pensioners. So it's interesting to look at those statistics against our own, where our own, this was a finger in the air back earlier in the year when we had early indication of what was going to happen. Then we were slightly higher than average at that point in time on our actives. So it was looking that in the Shropshire Fund, we may have 35% of our actives are going forward are going to have this protection. Slightly less of our possible leavers, and sort of not far off the average for pensioners. So we've got 12% there of pensioners and 10% of deferreds. But at that point in time, the deferreds and other leavers, we didn't realise that some of the certain categories of leavers would also be affected, so transfers. So it will be interesting to see what those statistics are when we actually know what's going to change. But a lot of members and a lot of records you'll see there that will be needing to be changed. So the underpin calculations for all post 1st of April 2014 leavers, we're going to have to go through certain stages to actually identify the members, obtaining the data from yourselves. We're going to have a look at how we're going to rectify those, how we're going to communicate to the members, how we're actually going to calculate the underpin retrospectively for everybody who's left, how we're going to do it going forward. In the proposals, it is proposed that we have to show this in the annual benefit statement going forward. So your data and your final pay that you're giving us under the old scheme rule regulations that Cheryl talked about, and your care pay is going to have to be even. Well, care pay should always be being accurate, but final pay, you know, we accept that sometimes that can't be taken out of a system completely accurately. If you know you're an employer that does have issues around that, you may need to have a look at how are you giving us that information, because we might have to show it. Pension funds are going to push back on this because we think the annual benefit statement as it is complex for members. Not everybody understands what we're showing them. Not everybody understands that it is important and they should be looking at it. But we'll wait and have a look at what comes out on that. But communication going forward is going to be very key with yourselves and with your employees. Thank you. So we've talked a lot about data today, and that's what you're here for. So once we've identified the affected members and identified which calculations that we need to be recalculating, we've got to have a look. Have we got any missing data? And if we have, we've got to collect it. So we've got to look at the part-time hours. So for anybody who was part-time is protected, have we got the continuation of their part-time hours? We've continued to collect this. We didn't stop. It is one of your iConnect fields. So we've got our fingers crossed that actually we should have them. But service breaks, we've never stopped collecting service breaks because it does affect the qualifying membership for somebody who's got service in the protected 2008 scheme rules. But have you been sending them us? You may know yourselves whether you have or haven't. So we definitely know we have some, but whether we've had them all, we're going to have to do some checks on this. So we're going to have to identify who's affected, identify if there's anything missing. So you'll see there in the top right hand corner, the red box is what we may be knocking on your door for. We need your support to look at anything that might be missing, anything that we need to fill in. So how are we going to check it on receipt? How are we going to actually identify a lot of hows on this? How are we going to know what isn't there? How are we going to know what's missing? So employer comms going forward is going to be paramount. I think we're going to be looking for a really good connection between the two of us to get assurance that what we've got hasn't got any gaps in it or hasn't got many gaps in it, hopefully. Thank you. So going forward, we've got the consultation closed on the 8th of October. So we're looking still in the sort of planning and the stakeholder engagement phase, which is why we're choosing to talk about this today. We've got communications been going out, and it will continue to go out next year. But this is hopefully we'll be starting to look at our data collection. Priority at the moment, especially for those local government employers who are affected by the cap and the changes to the early retirement rules, will obviously take precedence caps come in, well, will come in on the 4th of November, and also we should have the new rules in place by early next year, is what we're telling, what we're being told about our local government scheme rules about the effect on the benefits and what benefits can be paid unreduced going forward. So the rest of this year, I think priority will be given to that, but that's not going to stop the McLeod preparation having to go on in the background. So we'll be looking at what are we doing, how are we doing it, and then looking at actually putting in a plan of how we implement this in 2022, because of course, remember, the legislation won't change until the 1st of April 2022. So we won't be able to do anything permanently to anybody's record before then. We can just fill in the gaps of any missing data. Thank you. So next steps, I think for yourselves, we need to identify what is missing. Each year, Cheryl mentioned to you the 2 forms that you fill in. The people in the audience may or may not know, or will now see the relevance, that we have asked you to confirm that actually you've been giving us all of your hours changes, that you've been giving us all of your absences, that we've got all of this information. You've all been using iConnect for the last good few years. We're getting really good data exchanges. So what we are hoping, and I can't see Cheryl's face and I can't see Becky's face, and nor Helen's, because it's Helen's team. Anybody who knows Helen's team and the people on ops, they are, I can see Cheryl now, brilliant. We're hoping that at Shropshire, we do not have a huge exercise to fill in the gaps. You as employers, we hope, have been doing this. You've stated you have been, but has it? What we will be looking to do is probably send some type of data compliance survey shortly. So what we're wanting you to do, I think, after today's presentation, is to go back and have a chat with your officers in charge of doing the data uploads each month, that we've definitely had all of your hours changes, and that we've had we've had the breaks given to us as well, absences. These of course won't be necessarily, they're not covered through iConnect. You've had to continue giving us a form to tell us if there's been a gap. So has someone been on a maternity absence, a paternity absence, where they've gone to a period of no pay? That's the type of absences we're talking about. We need to ensure that any unpaid leave that we know about, that it's on someone's record, because this is going to be needed to do the underpin calculation. What we'll probably be doing is, with a data compliance survey, asking you for your own take on your own data. So you'll know, can you go and prove that you've actually sent us all the absences? Do you know that definitely your extracts have given us all the hours changes? Have you given us all of the averages for your casual workers? As Cheryl said, those are collected at the end of the year. Do we have any gaps? What we might then have to do is perhaps do a bit of audit checking. So we could, we haven't thought this through yet, so I am just telling you what we're thinking about, just so as you know, and it's not a big surprise. We might be asking you to identify perhaps a number of absences that you can pick up from your payroll records, that you've had people who've had no pay during the previous period, and you could give us those in individuals, and we can check that yes, we've got that on our record. We think that's possibly the better way around than us trying to identify that you've given us a break and then going back to you. I think it would be a better audit check that you might need to do it the other way around. So we do need to do that, and that will then give us full reassurance, I think, that our records hopefully are correct and that we haven't got too many gaps. So it's in this McLeod instance, it is definitely watch this space. We truly, truly believe that in Shropshire, we don't have a big issue. There are funds around the country that when the 2014 rules came in, that from 2015, they have only collected what was needed for the people who were either covered by the underpin then, and everybody else has just had what they needed for the new care scheme. We haven't done, so that might be an excellent thing for us and you, so as long as you've actually continued to give it to us. But please don't underestimate, if you haven't given it to us, we need this data right back to 2014, 1st of April 2014, and we will be knocking on your door. So that's it for today. I don't know, I can now put back up, sorry, I closed down chat, but I can't see that there's been any hands up or anybody in the chat. I just wondered, we can open it up for questions if anybody's got anything that they do want to. We've got 10 minutes. We can take hands up, or if you don't, and you can pop your camera on if you want to, or happy for you to pop it in chat box if you've got anything you want to ask. Hope we haven't bamboozled you today. Wanted to give you the top topics, really. What do you need to know about? I know we know pensions isn't your day job for everybody on this, but it's a big job nowadays, and I'm hoping that you are listened to by your employers and that you are resourced to do your statutory undertaking under our regulations. It is part of the role, and I hope none of you are struggling with this. Right.